Hey, Steph. Let me get you invite to video. I'm going to turn off WaitBot. Stephanie! Yay! Okay, let me put this. For some reason, my system's a little slow. So you guys hang in with me. We're going to get Stephanie up here on the stage to video. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here, I will share your show.
Yes.
Oh. Share.
Yeah, I need to broadcast to the world too. And I need to figure out how to do that a little simpler too, so I'm not taking as much time. Okay. Hey, yeah. Rocksteady's here too. And so welcome everybody. Let me we are here for Alignment Vision Action. My name is Laurel Rutledge. I am the host of the show tonight, and I am so absolutely beyond thrilled to have Stephanie. I think it was either Rocksteady or Stephanie that called you the mayor of Fireside, right? So I'm so excited to have Stephanie Mcgann Jantzen on, and we are going to talk about alignment. We're going to talk about vision. We're going to talk about action. It is going to be fantastic. Stephanie, welcome to Alignment and Connection. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
This is going to be awesome. So here's where I want to start. So Stephanie and I got a chance to talk, and of course I could talk to her for 4 hours. But what I told her was the thing that made me say I've got to have Stephanie on is on the very first show I saw her on, she said something that was really profound for me that actually goes and aligns with this whole alignment, vision, action. She made a decision based on some things that were happening that just weren't aligned. And that decision had consequences, but she made it anyway. And so Stephanie, because I don't want to give the story away, will you please tell people kind of about this decision that you made, why you made it, and then how you've kind of managed through the ugliness that came out of that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So again, thank you for having me, Laurel. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm a big fan of yours and very much aligned with your approach to creating content and the important conversations I think that we need to have.
Yes, thank you.
So for those in the audience and those listeners, I grew up in a prominent Democrat family. And when I was quite young, I got bit by the political bug, and I did my own research, which in my world of fighting disinformation is actually like a cuss word at this point. But and I decided the Republican Party sounded like a really good idea. I studied the presidency of Abraham Lincoln, and I thought, so this man actually understood that you can't enslave people. Yes. That sounds like a really reasonable and brave position to take. Especially because he was not actually equipped to be president. He surrounded himself with really smart people, and he figured it out as he went, but he stayed aligned with his values. And I thought that was really important. So my dad from there forward called me lovingly his DNA misfire. And so I ran with that. Yeah. But I have run Republican races on all levels of government, local, state, federal. I've done advance for former presidents. Mm-hmm. And I worked my way through sort of the ranks of the party. And I was raised in a time in politics when Republicans and Democrats, while they may have not been aligned on sort of their approach to policy and their sort of like their approach to even their spiritual life, whatever that may be, mm-hmm. but they got along. They talked to each other. They had conversations about where you're coming from. And, you know, the funny thing is that some of the lack of transparency in government actually worked because they had to do a dance in front of their party base, but they did go have dinner after. They'd oftentimes go to a famous spot, certainly in California, a famous Chinese restaurant. Mm-hmm. And those napkin deals where they decided what they were going to do actually created some of the best policy we've seen historically for everyone in the United States. That's actually the truth.
Yeah.
So as we were approaching the presidential election of 2016, one of my best friends is, she's a dean at a university and she's brilliant. She happens to be African-American. Mm-hmm. And I say that because she also brings her perspective as a Black woman in America, right? She is strong. She is smart. And we talk, I mean, every election, we're on the phone doing like live commentating with each other.
Yes.
So she and I were getting very concerned. And what was interesting, let me back up, going back to your question.
Yes.
So I am someone who, because I'm in politics and policy, I study people, certainly people that are rising in the ranks, whether it's business, politics, whatever that might be.
Right.
We've been well aware of Donald Trump for a very long time.
Yes.
And when he decided he was going to run, I said, he's going to win. And I was mocked. People were laughing. I was getting sort of those proverbial pats on the head like, oh.
Right.
And I said, you watch. And this is before the election even started. This is before it started. Republican pollsters who were not supporting Trump actually said there's no way this clown is going to win. And they started doing surveys. And especially like you guys, the amount of money that's spent on surveys just to understand where voters are is in the hundreds of thousands and hits the millions.
Yes.
And they all came back with, he's not going to win. And I said, he's going to win.
Yes.
So whatever questions you're asking or whatever questions you're not asking, you're missing it.
Yes.
And so sure enough, election night, my BFF and I from a university were on the phone. And she was like, there's no way. And I said, oh no, he's going to win.
Yeah.
And of course, as we know, he did.
Yeah.
So I knew, and I was never confused, that this man was not, by the way, I'm telling you this literally, he was not a Republican. Let me make this point. He's neither a Republican nor a Democrat. He's neither pro-choice nor pro-life. He's neither pro-science nor anti-science.
Right.
And if you're mad at me already, let me explain what that means. It means that in the world of business, certainly as a developer in a town that's very hard to get projects developed in, what you learn is you have to sort of chameleon.
Yes.
By the way, this is not unusual. Just so you know, anytime you're trying to get any policy, any project, whatever that might be passed, you have to kind of chameleon. And so by the way, I'm not mad at him for that yet. I'm not mad. I get it. Like, I get it. I get it. So he employed the same tactics that he did when he was a developer. Again, I'm still not mad at him yet. I'm not. The problem is that this man knows how to influence and he knows how to market. It was one of the greatest marketing campaigns we've ever seen. It was the right message at the right time, tapping into the anger and disillusionment that Americans were feeling, which I understood. And the Democrats had a bad candidate.
Absolutely.
End of story. Now, if you like Hillary Clinton, then don't get mad at me either. I'm speaking as a political consultant. She was a terrible candidate. Just saying.
Agreed.
So I knew that this man was going to have the ability, with the power behind him, to demolish our democracy.
Yes.
And so, again, I want to remind everybody, you were talking to a woman who was 25 years a Republican political consultant. I was interviewed on national news, certainly interviewed in the California media market and others, as someone who had expertise in this space, political strategy, etc. But I knew that he was going to be dangerous. And he was. And he still is.
Yes.
So there was a group of Republican consultants who, some of them were liked in the past, some of them were not liked, call it what it is. But they decided to form a coalition that was called the Lincoln Project. And the purpose of it was to say, this is not conservatism. This is not Republican politics. This is a clown. This is a marketing expert. This is not a president. And he's dangerous. And we know why, but most people don't know why. What's the threat to democracy? Most people don't know. That's okay. Right. So they pulled together this band of people, again, Republican political consultants, who literally created a coalition to run against Donald Trump. One of the co-founders, Mike Madrid, who I've known for 30 years in California politics, called me and said, this is what we're doing. We're about to launch. And while California is not a key critical state on a relative basis during a presidential election, I'd really like you to sort of head up the California effort. And I sort of took a deep breath and I hung up the phone and I started counting the people that I would lose and going, okay, I started counting the clients I would lose. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And it was this weird flex, by the way, because I'm a single mom, responsible for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, there was so much risk, by the way, and I got the ramifications of the risk.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway.
Yeah.
Because also, by the way, when COVID-19 hit, the disinformation that was running rampant, disinformation that was specifically targeted to people of color, LGBTQ community, was not only rampant, but it was effective.
Yeah.
And I could no longer, I don't know how to explain it. I could no longer stand by quietly. I just couldn't. And I was watching people that I've known for decades who were going along with the program. And I thought, so y'all are just going to we're just going to start lying and people are dying. I mean, is that what we're going to do? And you're cool with it? I can't.
Yeah.
And it is the single most, and I'm going to use the word brave, but when I use the word brave, there's no hubris attached to that.
Right.
Because with brevity comes fear.
Yes.
You can be brave and afraid at the same time.
Yes.
By the way, typically being brave means that you are afraid.
Exactly.
Because it means you have to dig deep because you are scared and say, I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then within the Lincoln Project, they formed a coalition of Lincoln women. And this was sort of a group of women that were going to reach out to Republican and Democrat women across the United States and say, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. So then the press release goes out. I'm one of, 14 women in the whole United States who was named. Y'all, the whole US of A. This press release goes out. And I'm like, right? So I'm like, oh my God. You know, maybe my kids don't have to have dinner every night. Like, maybe I was like, what have I done? So we're getting bombarded with calls from MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, you name it, we were getting bombarded. And I thought to myself, like, okay, like you're doing this and you're doing it for the right reason. And so whoever you piss off and whoever gets offended or whoever decides they're going to now come after you.
Yep.
Because look, y'all, I was also attacking their livelihood and I'm not confused about that, right? Friends who literally, this is how they made money and they have families to support too.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wasn't angry with the people who couldn't.
Yeah.
But the messages that I received through text, through direct message on Instagram and other social media platforms, like, oh my God, you are so brave. The support that I received on the back end, and I'm thinking to myself, listen, y'all, I can't even afford being brave. Also, there's an element of assumption that you can afford to be brave. You can afford to come. None of that existed for me.
No,
I really couldn't. Afford it. But it is a fallacy, but I also couldn't be quiet. It was a really weird thing. So I was front and center and I spent 8 months on Twitter.
Yeah.
When you on Twitter, for those of you who are on Twitter, if you do @ and a username, they get the notification.
Yes.
I was adding Donald Trump on Twitter. When I say 24/7, I'm not kidding. Like I would nap and then I'd get up and I was just bombarding him. He never blocked me, which makes me feel like I was fundamentally ineffective.
Right.
But I was like, you should be blocking me by now. But it absolutely was the right thing. And I was so sickened by what I was watching. I couldn't not.
Yeah.
And so the net effect of it was my phone stopped ringing, clients went away, because even if they agreed with me, I was now politically really risky.
Yeah.
My reputation in the world of politics was, right? And if you're a Republican, they're like, that's cool, but you can't go work for the Democrats. I wasn't trying to either, by the way.
Right.
So I would say in the world of Stephanie being brave, and I've certainly had plenty of stories, this was a moment in time where I said, I cannot remain silent. By the way, I didn't just do the Trump thing.
Right.
But I moved straight to Georgia after that.
Yes.
With Ossoff and Warnock. Helped Stacey Abrams and her group and helped the Lincoln Project as we worked towards that, because we knew that the multi-armed hydra that is Trumpism, that's sort of the word for it. And Trumpism is really defined by, this is not a political movement. This is not an ideological movement. This is a desire
Right.
and a well-funded, well-planned execution of
Yes.
turning America into a form of no longer democracy, but
Right.
authoritarianism. And
Autocracy.
just
Yes.
authoritarianism simply means that you have a ruler who's
Right.
making decisions independent of a body that's sort of a check and balances, which is what our
Right.
democracy is based on. Trump was never interested in what Congress had to say. Trump was never interested in what the Department of Homeland Security had to say. Trump was not interested in what any of our top government officials had to say, by the way, including our military.
Yes.
And there's, of course, a comeuppance happening now with the January 6th committee. And then recently, Alex Jones, of course, had a little problem with his attorney who, oops, I gave away all of your cell phone data. And as a result, the January 6th committee actually has subpoenaed that document. And I'm going to tell you, it tastes as damn good as a good lasagna with a glass of red wine.
Right.
Because like, don't misunderstand this. These are people
Yes.
that are fine
Yes.
with hurting people. And when I
Yes.
say hurt, I mean, if you're dying of a disease, they don't care. By the way, again, I want to just come back and remind you that I might sound like an activist on either side of the aisle. Literally, I'm actually not crazy. I might have rooms in my life where I'm a little crazy. My kids might say that, but it's in a good way. These are people who do not have your best interest at heart. They have the best interest of certain things that keep their systems running. And that is where it ends. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen.
So Stephanie, the thing for me was, because we hear people say their aha moment, their watershed moment, like, right, I couldn't sit tight anymore. I couldn't be quiet anymore. I just had to do something. And being brave in the face of fear, right? We hear all those things. But when you made that decision to just say, I am going to be a part of this Lincoln Project, and I started thinking through, the friends that were going to go and these things that were going to go. If someone is listening in the audience, and by the way, thank you guys so much for being here. And if you have comments or something, please feel free to ask yourself to, ask to be on the stage and all that. We'd love to hear from you. What was it though for you, Stephanie, when you got that call, had to sit down and decide what you were going to do, single mom, what's happening? What's the impact of this going to be? Who may not be thinking about something that's that big, but is thinking about having to have a contrary opinion, maybe in their job with their boss, who is like,
right,
the golden child.
Right.
How do you evaluate that risk?
Yeah, I love this question, and here's why. What's interesting about having a moment in your life where you make a decision that things that are not only not aligned with your values and aligned with your core, you can't unring that bell once you do it. When you step out into that arena, you can't back up and say, just kidding. Because there's something you have to dig so deep into to access that power and that commitment to do the right thing, even if people don't like it. You can't unring that bell. So what I have found in the world of, I will say, corporate America, is that there are things that I am not aligned with everywhere. And when I say that, understand this too. Corporate America has not had its own true reevaluation. And by the way, when I say corporate America, I'm brushing with a very broad stroke. Certainly there are companies that totally get it, and CEOs who are leading from a place of, vulnerability and strength. And I mean, certainly there are, but brushing with a broad stroke.
Yeah. But those are few and far between, if we're honest.
They're few and far between. They're few and far between. And because we just aren't doing it right in corporate America. And we also know, based on data, that not doing it right is costing in the billions of dollars in the world of turnover and employee satisfaction and all the issues that they know they're facing. And we've had a lot of really interesting leaders and researchers who are coming out saying, this is what we know. And if you can change these things that still align with the direction the company is going in, they may be aligned to their profit and loss statements, their revenue, et cetera, we can still do it differently. Because here's how you keep people. And yet we just aren't there.
Yeah.
So what does it look like in the world of business to stay aligned with your values.
Mm-hmm.
And I will suggest to you that typically the smartest people in the boardroom are not necessarily the people that walked in the room being the smartest. It's the
Right.
people that ask the smartest questions. And if
Yes.
you ask the right questions to ensure, what I'm hearing you say in business is this, and I'm hearing that this is the responsibility I have in my role. I
Mm-hmm.
have a question about that. What
Mm-hmm.
does it look like if within that sphere of responsibility something comes up for me that is not aligned with my job description or it goes against my job description?
Yes.
What is the process by which I need to reach out to you or a manager or the SVP or whoever that is and
Mm-hmm.
understand what you would like me to do next?
Yes.
Answer the question. What if something occurs that I know is going to be bad for the company, but it's coming from somebody above? How would you like me to handle that? And asking those questions, and then at the end of whether it's an interview or a check-in with
Mm-hmm.
someone who is your boss,
Mm-hmm.
saying, here's what I've heard you say. Did I get that right? Yes
Yes.
or no? Walk through that. Okay, this is what I heard you say. And so in the order of what you feel is important in my job, how would you order that? What is the most important? And what
Yes.
things will kick off a pause and a check-in with you versus at what point do you say, I trust your judgment?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
just come back and let me know how it goes.
Yes.
And by the way, if you promote me, is there any training involved in that promotion or did I just get promoted because I'm good at my job? But what if I really suck at people? Well, how do we handle
Right.
that? And if
Yes.
the answer is you'll be fine, you're 2 minutes away from getting fired.
Yes.
I promise.
Yes.
So,
I
and
agree.
I'm just saying, so ask smart questions, be clear that your job is aligned with where you come from. Because you know what? Most of us are people that if the answer to someone who's underperforming is, well, then we'll just evaluate firing them. If
Yes.
that's not aligned with your values, then you might want to reconsider, are you in the right job? Are you interviewing for the right job?
Mm-hmm.
Is this the right company?
Yes.
Ask good, thoughtful questions.
Yes. You know, it's so fun. I'm so glad you said that because as a recovering senior HR person, I'm like, you are interviewing the organization just as much as they're interviewing you. And not all money is good money. Not all jobs are the good job. And
Nope.
it is not unkind to be clear. You need to be clear on their expectations of you, and they need to be clear on your expectations of them. And then you need to check in
Yep.
on a regular basis to make sure nothing has changed. And there's
That's right.
something that happens, which is why I love listening to you, is there's something that happens along the way. I call it like the boiled frog syndrome, especially for those of us who are type A insecure overachievers, right?
Yep.
Because we
Yep.
talk to us for, oh, that didn't go well. What did I say wrong? How did I do this wrong? If I just work harder, it's like automatic, right? The automatic self-evaluation. And so we end up being in these toxic places that have gotten so bad for us before we know it. And then we're like, wait, no, I'm not crazy. They
Right.
just said this thing, but their behavior did something different. And I'm telling
Right.
you, people will listen to what you say, but they will believe what you do.
Amen. Amen. And by the way, and Laurel, I know you won't take offense to this,
Yeah, no,
but if y'all are in a company, HR is not your friend.
no.
HR is there to protect the company against you. And I don't mean that in a way like you did something bad or
Right,
you, it
right.
just means that is not, that department is set up to protect the company. That's what they're there for. So don't get that piece twisted either.
Yeah,
It's called human resources, but I think that we should probably retitle that. And
yeah.
again, no offense.
No, I'm not offended at all.
I understand the role.
Yeah, no, I am not offended at all because and that's one of the reasons why I talk a lot about HR because I'm like, look, you've got to be a business person first and an HR person second.
Right.
Because if
Right.
the company isn't doing what it's supposed to do, nobody's going to have a job. Now, here's the
That's
thing.
right.
Good HR people are also holding those leaders accountable behind the
I
scenes.
agree. I agree.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not in a company anymore because what we're not going to do is we're not going to lie. We're not going to lie. If we are going to, I'll give you a prime example.
Thank you.
And this gets to kind of what you were saying, being brave, saying those things, saying the unsaid. And I remember when my last company carved out, we had to talk about what we were going to do with people who were going to stay with us, people were going to stay with the other company, that kind of thing. And we had to write this letter. And one of the things we said was, look, we are going to do our best. We are going to keep everybody's benefits the same for at least the first couple of years. And then we will reevaluate because we'll be a different company, right?
Right.
And the company we were leaving was like, no, 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 just tell them, just trust us, you'll be fine. I'm like, okay, one, no. And two, no. And three, hell no. Because
Yep.
we just have a survey that says we don't trust management. So we're not doing that.
Thank
We're not
you.
doing that. And so I think that whole idea of, and I get on HR people all the time, I'm like, if you don't have courage, I need you to get the hell out of HR. You have
Amen.
got to be able to speak up. You have got to understand when the company is screwing people,
Yep.
you have got to speak up. And when people are not doing the right thing, you got to be able to hold them accountable too. You've got to be able to
Absolutely.
walk that line. And the problem is most HR people, 95% of HR people don't do that
Right.
because they're more concerned about being nice and doing the
Right.
fluffy stuff. And I always
Yeah.
told my folks, I'm not the party planner. That's not what I do.
That's right.
I don't plan parties.
That's
Right?
right.
We are
That's
about
right.
utilizing the human capital asset, which people also get pissed off about.
Right.
Using the
Right.
human capital asset because it is a cost. It is a cost to a company that's trying to make a bottom line. Let's be real.
Well, Laurel, you know what's interesting is that it wasn't really until the 1980s that we
Hmm.
started to balance the checkbooks of companies on the backs of employees.
Yes.
We didn't do
Agreed.
that before. We didn't do
Nope.
that before. We'd
Nope.
figure stuff out. But in a time, especially with COVID, when we see a lot of corporate America sort of contracting and then
Yes.
expanding, and then guess what? Contracting again. We're at another
Yes.
contraction, by the way, and you're going to see more of that, FYI. So when you hear about the great resignation and there's 2 jobs for every single person,
Yes.
that isn't true. Just listen, I promise you,
Right.
it's not true anymore. And
Right.
so they are contracting again, and they will
Yes.
contract more because while you see the market is doing well, we aren't going to be okay economically. And middle and lower class, when I say lower class, I mean
I
economic
know what you,
status,
yes.
are
Hmm.
going to dive. And so
Yes.
this is another, here we go. Like
Yeah.
2020, 2021, 2022 can all kiss my grits.
Yes. I know. And
I'm
it's
thinking
about
2023 can too, but we're not there yet.
probably. I'm thinking we're looking at
Probably.
2025 before we get some
I am too.
normalcy,
I am
whatever
too.
that looks like. But
Right.
I think it gets back to, too, when you talk about alignment and vision action, being really cognizant of what people are saying. What are they doing? Because, if you think about like trickle down economics, right? We're gonna give all these tax breaks because companies will do it and then they'll pour back into the business. That's a lie. When we the same thing in the 80s when we stopped talking about people first, we also
Yep.
stopped talking about stakeholders and started talking about
Correct.
shareholders, which
Correct.
completely changed the alignment into the
Absolutely.
action being about stock price and market
That's
value
right.
as opposed to B2B, B2C, that kind of
That's right.
engagement, right?
That's
And
right.
so I need people, and that's what I love about you, Stephanie, is I need people not to be unemotional because emotions are real, but
Yeah.
I need us to get through the emotion and start listening.
Right.
Start listening. And
Right.
so you talked about something too a minute ago. You mentioned when you were younger and you were in this heavy Democratic family, but then you started
Yeah.
doing your educating yourself, right? And doing your own research. And then you said, well, research. I want to talk a little bit about that because I say all the time, educate yourself. Educate yourself. Go learn, go listen, go find out what's on your ballot, go find out what people are
Right.
saying.
Right.
But there's this thing that people say, real researchers say, stop saying that. You're not really researching, right? When you tell people, especially like as you move forward, go and find out the truth.
Mhm.
As you call yourself, which I love, by the slayer of disinformation.
Yep.
Go find the truth. What would you tell people when they're feeling something that's off? It's not
Yeah.
aligned. They're
Yeah.
not quite sure what it is. What would you tell people to do to figure that out so they can move into a better space?
I mean, look, even if you don't have that little feeling inside,
Hmm.
we, I'm going to use COVID as an example
Yes.
because it's just so, for me, easy. Um, I have done some behind the scenes work with healthcare professionals, vaccine developers. And by the way, when we say vaccine developers, I don't mean pharma. That's not what I'm talking
Hmm.
about. I'm talking about the actual researchers, the actual people that are taking the genetic code
Hmm.
of a virus and they're figuring out how they're going to kill it. And if they can't
Yeah.
kill it, how they're going
Right.
to make it not deadly, right? I'm talking about the actual
Right.
people in the lab. Those are different people.
Yes.
So I immediately jumped into a nationwide effort trying to help the CDC and trying to help people who are kind of stars in the world of healthcare.
Hmm.
on how to
Mm-hmm.
communicate about COVID, because from the beginning it was bad. Now I'm also,
Yes.
look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to blame the former president, because when Dr. Fauci became the spokesperson and it was no
Oh,
longer, the spotlight was no longer on him,
he threw a
that's when it
tantrum.
all started. But that,
Yes.
correct. But that's another story.
Right. That's a different discussion.
So if you are researching, if you are doubtful, if you are concerned
Mm-hmm.
about something like a pandemic and you
Mm-hmm.
don't know where to go, because news today, good journalism today, is typically behind a paywall on social media.
Yes.
Like fast food, tends to be cheap, if not free, accessible, viral, and it will swim in the algorithm that you are living in on social
Yes.
media.
Yes.
And almost always when I talk to someone and I say, where did you get your information? Especially when it's wrong,
Yes.
it's Facebook,
Yes.
it's Twitter, it's
Stop.
TikTok, it's whatever,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
algorithms learn. And
Yes.
y'all, look, platforms, that's another story, but I'm just going to make this one quick because I can't help myself.
Yeah.
The monetization models for social media are what causes the most engagement. And by
Mm-hmm.
engagement, I mean fighting, right?
Yes.
So it's built
Yes.
to pin us against each other.
Yes.
I'll leave that there because that is not
I
the
hear
purpose
you.
of today's discussion.
Right.
But if you fall and you break a bone,
Mm-hmm.
if you are bleeding out, if something happens to you, do you know where you go? You go to the emergency room.
Right.
And you go to the emergency room because that's where you go when you have a problem, because you have healthcare professionals that are going to take care of you because they went to school to do that, and they have to pass rigorous training and do ongoing, something we call continuing education, to make sure that they're up to date on the latest and greatest research associated with how to treat this or how to deal with this. So when you are researching around COVID or politics,
Mm-hmm.
here's what I promise you. And again, it's coming from someone who's I know what I'm talking about, y'all.
Right.
If you go to Mayo Clinic, if you go to Johns Hopkins University, if you go to UC San Francisco, if you go to the places that treat you if you have cancer, go to the places you go if someone in your family comes down with Alzheimer's, go there and you'll find this amazing thing.
Yes.
The same
Yes.
thing. And they're all saying the same thing, not because they're getting paid to say the same thing. It's because the research and the data, and
Mm-hmm.
research and data does not mean opinion, by the way. When I say data, I literally mean that 2 plus 2 is 4. And so if the
Mm-hmm.
data shows that this is what it is, then that is what it is.
Yes.
Also, when you are researching, you will be tempted to stay within that algorithm. And you'll
Yes.
be tempted because by the way, if you didn't know this, the way our brain works,
Mm-hmm.
there is a dopamine hit associated with seeing a lot of people say something that hits you right here in this little
Yes.
space we call confirmation bias,
Yes.
which is I have a bias and I'm assuming the government's out to get me. The government wants to kill
Yes.
me. This is population control. And when there's a bunch of people saying you're right, you know what happens? Dopamine. I have a community who
Exactly.
says me too. I have a community that says I see you.
Mm-hmm.
And so research means you're going to reputable and reliable sources that say this is the data.
This is the
And
day.
so I know that isn't sexy. I get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it. And I know 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 plus 2 is never 7. It's
Ever.
just not. And so if you're
Ever.
being told in this community that says, I love you, hey man, I love you,
Yeah.
but 2 plus 2 is 7, reasonable people can arrive at the conclusion that you've been lied to all the time and it's really always been 7, even if the data, even if I go 1 finger, 2 finger is 2, right?
Yes.
1 plus 1. And confirmation bias is so strong, you can wind up going,
Yes.
I see a 7. A
Yes.
2 isn't even really a number. They've
Yeah.
lied all the time.
Yes.
Reasonable people can get pulled into this type of nonsense. And
Yes.
so do your research.
Yes.
But when you research, seek out reputable sources
Yes.
that all along have told you the truth because they're coming from a place of data. And then I'm going to say one more thing and I'll be quiet. Do y'all remember when COVID hit and really impacted New York. In New
Mm-hmm.
York, we
Yes.
tend to have a high population that are living really close together, right?
Yes.
Lots of buildings with lots of people in elevators because people live
Yes.
up. They don't really live
Yes.
sideways because it's New
Yes.
York. And people were dying of COVID left and right because
Yes.
it's highly contagious. People live in close quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And I had friends of mine who are healthcare professionals that literally volunteer their time to go work at the hospital, which is
Mm-hmm.
Elmhurst Hospital, where they were throwing people on ventilators. They were trying
Oh.
everything they could. They were trying hydroxychloroquine. They were trying ivermectin. They were trying
Mhm.
anything they could because guess what? It was new.
Yes.
And do you remember that time when we all stood around them like warriors, like people coming back from fighting in a war?
Yes.
And when the healthcare professionals were coming out of Elmhurst Hospital and we were grabbing, pans and pots and banging
Yes.
and
I
thank
remember
you. And
that.
they were
Yes.
our heroes.
Yes.
And then do you remember when they weren't? And do you remember when suddenly they were the enemy? I bet you don't remember that time. I remember it very clearly because I knew it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
That is when the disinformation engine hit,
Yes.
and it hit hard. And we went from saying, we celebrate you, we appreciate you, we know you're putting yourself on the front lines every day to save people.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, oh, wait, you're getting paid. Oh, wait,
Right.
and that didn't come organically. People didn't
No.
just wake up one day and say, healthcare professionals are making money on vaccines, that didn't
Right.
happen overnight. That happened because, FYI, I'm just giving you the truth,
Yeah.
domestically.
Yes.
So not only was this happening internally
Mm-hmm.
domestically, but this was happening outside of the United States
Right.
with our adversaries, including Russia and China and other organizations. I say organizations because
Yeah.
they're countries, but
Right.
they're also organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And the disinformation campaign
Yes.
began.
Yes.
And what's devastating is that we then began to see incredible loss. And again, people of color,
Yes.
marginalized communities, poor
Mm-hmm.
people who didn't have easy access to health care. And so again, going back to your question, sorry, I'm really passionate about this. I have to tell
No,
you,
I get it.
it pisses
That's why
me
you're here.
off.
Me too. Disinformation slayer. I know.
Do your research, but do your
Yeah.
research does not mean Facebook groups. Do your research does not mean going to your local mom's group, and do your research does not include MLM companies. It does not include that. It means go to the places you go when you or your family needs care, because that's who
Exactly.
you trust anyway. So please, that's all.
Go
Oh,
to the right places and go to the places that are going to tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. That's where you
thank you.
go.
Thank you.
Jason, thank you so much for being on the show. You are on the stage. Do you have a question or comment for me? And I did see your comment around HR and companies. Yeah, companies, bless their hearts, they're not all doing the right thing. But yeah, what have you got to add to the show? You will unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for letting me on stage.
Sure.
The right of disinformation, false news, fake facts, whatever you has been built up. It's just repackaged so that it rings in your ear. It's a marketing thing. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why is because look at, for example, you take Associated Press, you look at the requirements to be an Associated Press fact checker. Who happens to use that? Where does the money go from? You look at IG and so many of the other platforms, they heavily weigh and they pay for it. But
Mm-hmm.
Associated Press, they're also ruled by a conglomerate. They're a not-for-profit. Key difference between nonprofit, a not-for-profit does profit. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one clear point when we look at disinformation and false news or fake news, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is when it comes to your alignment, and you were talking about it briefly earlier, and talking against the overwhelming voice of reason of the masses, do you practice your resonance in yourself before you even go into that meeting? Because nothing is going to catch you off guard. You know it's going to happen. You know it's a possibility, especially when you run in management. I work in international trade. I work in agriculture. I work with
Mm-hmm.
food right now. What's
Mm.
the biggest commodity that everyone's scared of that you hear on social media? It's food running out.
Yes.
Right. Right.
But
And
what
food
they
prices.
don't
Yeah, both.
But what they are not telling you is that the Department of Agriculture is doing a referendum on what they allow in grow practices. So it's kind of like covering their ass because
Mm-hmm.
our farmers are being told not to grow certain crops because of water depletion. What they're really trying to say is the seeds that they're growing are causing health problems at an exponential rate, and they don't have enough food supply for themselves at the top percentage. Now that's allegedly, but I will say with a strong reference that it's pretty
Yeah.
true.
Right.
So Jason, this is an interesting question that you
Yeah.
pose, because there's disinformation is everywhere, and that includes, oh my God, our food source and how we grow food and that is a whole, we could do a hours long podcast on that alone.
We should do that.
So Jason, you're not, and Jason, by the way, you aren't, I'm not going to say you're wrong, nor am I going to suggest that you shouldn't be curious. I will also say to you, by the way, just so you know, it's not just that COVID, and Jason, I'm gonna take a little bit of a tangent. I'm gonna be quiet because I want to make sure I'm addressing what you asked. We have had issues with our food supply anyway. It's just that most people didn't really know about it. What we have coming up now relative to not only COVID-19 and supply chain, but the war in Ukraine, and Ukraine being a grower and supplier of some fundamental food products such as wheat and other things that go into all of the food. And we now have countries that are more food insecure than they were before. And the impact of that on all of us relative to food supply. But just wait until, and I'm sure you've seen the price of meat right now has risen significantly. And what we're not talking about now is that, well, you just wait until slaughter, it's a thing. But when we hit that point and we need the people to do that, package the meat and do all of that, that's another cost. And you're going to see that go up again. And the reason, and there was a bunch of conspiracy theories, Jason, around, oh my God, Walmart's somewhere, they're locking their meat down. What do they know? And it's like, well, because people are stealing it. And the sad truth behind that, because people were stealing formula and other food things, is because they can't afford to feed their families. So it's really interesting from a conspiracy theorist standpoint, but the sad news on the back end of that is that people are now stealing food, and they're stealing food because they can't feed their families. So, but Jason, going back to your question, which is in your space that you are in from a professional perspective, I would love you to go back and restate your question relative to aligning with your values and walking into these meetings. And if you would just restate that question specifically so that either Laurel or I, whoever that was directed to, can answer better and more specifically related to the question that you asked about being aligned and in the meetings you're walking into, if you wouldn't mind.
Earlier, you did state in so many words that when a company has a specific message that doesn't match with the truth, keyword, doesn't match along with the guidelines in which they are run and how they reach their objectives for their profits and so forth. A lot of times you have already seen the signs of what's coming. How do you practice? And I key in this because for my clients, before I have to give them bad news, I prepare my breathing, and no matter what, I'm like stone faced. And I have to be, as an attorney, you have to walk in and say, look, in the best interests of your shareholders and profits, this is the reality. This is what we're dealing with. And this is the fault. How do you practice bad news and good news? Sometimes there's good news. You got to look at also you can't just look at the bad, but you have to look at also how do you prepare for the same measure, good or bad or both.
Got it.
That's a great question.
Okay, so I didn't know you were an attorney, so that changes how I'm going to answer that question. because
I'm asking you as a person.
Right. No, I get it. I totally.
I'm asking you. There's a difference between when I'm giving legal advice or I'm asking a legal question. So you are indemnified from or being held against your word.
That's my favorite word, indemnification.
Fair disclosure. This will not be held against you at any purpose for any point of profit or negligence.
By the way, I love your answer because it made me laugh, but that's actually not why I said it was going to change. I said it was going to change because in your role, as a lot of what I've done in the past has been actually attorneys hire me to help with the communication around what they have to share. So I totally get it. I wasn't worried about myself. Should I be? Ooh, conspiracy theory. I'm kidding, Jason. So Jason, as the attorney who is responsible for sort of sharing this in terms of, I would say number one to you, not that you need my advice, but I'm just going to give it anyway because I'm famous for unsolicited advice, is how, and you already know this as an attorney, but it's like how you present information, right? My understanding is this is the data that we're seeing, but here's what's really going on. And we need to have a conversation about that. As an attorney, here's the trick for you, because you're in a unique space. And many of the attorneys that I have worked with, who, as I said, tend to hire me to help their clients in terms of communications, is this. Your role and your responsibility to whatever clients you are working with is to protect their interests through a legal lens. And as long as you are in the business of ensuring that you're doing what you're supposed to do, that's what you're hired to do, then that's where you have to sort of say, if you stay in where you're staying, that you separate out your job and your responsibility from a legal perspective with your client or your company or whatever your relationship is from your own ethics and values. I think that happens to attorneys a lot. Most attorneys are in that situation if they have clients, versus if you're an attorney that's working in-house for an organization that you are totally aligned with, you love the cause, and you're the in-house counsel. That's a very different situation, because it means you've had the ability, the luxury, you can title it whatever you want, to say, this is totally aligned with my values and I'm representing them, and yay. But many attorneys have clients that come in, and your job is to take the law and apply it to the situation that your client is in. And so, Jason, this is where self-care comes in, and have go for runs or listen to podcasts, because Jason, I've been in that situation, right? I mean, in my world of helping certain candidates, I'm not going to lie, there were candidates where I was like, you should not be elected dog catcher, let alone a member of Congress. And I will admit to you, there's a couple clients that I had as candidates who I left the campaign. I literally walked off. I mean, because I had to, like FBI raids, that's a whole other story. But when the FBI comes in and they look at you and you're like,
that's over a glass of wine story. Yeah.
Right. But Jason, the truth of the matter is, Jason, as long as you're in the position that you're in, where you are applying the law, you have a responsibility to your client that you said yes to ensure that their risk is protected. And that's what you have to do. So then you dive into self-care, right? If you have a beautiful wife or a beautiful husband, I'm not judging. Make sure you lean in and enjoy that relationship. If you're dating, if you enjoy cooking, get into self-care, because at the end of the day, that's your job. Like, that is your job. And it's a sucky answer.
Yeah. Well, no, but I think it's the truth. And the only thing I would add to that is, the challenge, because as an in-house person, I always tell people, CEOs, the trifecta is the CEO, the general counsel, and the HR person, not the CFO.
Yep.
HR person,
That's right?
You can make numbers. Right. Whether or not you should or shouldn't is not the question, but you can make numbers be whatever you want them to be, right? That's just the truth. So, but what I found to that same extent, Jason, was a lot of times in that GC role or in that CHRO role, it's that, look, there's very few things where we're going to say you absolutely must or you absolutely cannot. Very few. And those are legal or compliance based, right? Everything else is a choice. So I know for me, there were oftentimes I'd walk in and say, this is not a can or a can't, because we can do anything we decide to do. This is a should or a shouldn't conversation. And that gets deeper about how you want to show up and if your actions are going to align with your words, and that's ultimately on you. But we are going to have the conversation. If I'm your person, what we are going to do is we're going to talk about it. We're going to put it all out on the table. Then we're going to make the decision, and I'm going to have my plan B through Z when you do something stupid, because I know what's going to happen. Kind of like Stephanie, I see the train coming down the track.
That's right.
But this is a business decision. So all I can do is I'm going to sing off the same sheet of paper, and I'm going to prepare us to minimize the risk as much as possible. And then if it gets too bad, which is the reason I left corporate, I just can't. I've got to decide when it's that much not aligned with me, I got to go. I've got to go. Because until you have your own business, there is going to be only rare occasions where that organization you're working is going to be 100% lockstep aligned with your values. It's going to be very rare. And that's okay. You just got to understand what your deal breakers are.
Right. And I get that. I mean, all the time when we exit out of law school, and one of the things that one of my advisors and Dean said, and Dean Pickett says, hey, I don't care who you like or who you don't like. You're going to work for people that you don't like for the rest of your life. So get over it. Number one. Number two, You have the rules of engagement in your hand. We've trained you for 3.5 years to get here. So you are the expert, no matter what people say. Secondly, when I worked as a prosecutor for a little while, and prosecuting human trafficking, there were a lot of people that I had doubts on. I didn't have enough facts, but the bosses wanted an outcome. And so what I had when I resigned my position, and it was a big risk, it was huge, because I was like, look, I'm only 2 years out of law school. I've only had my license. And no, see, people think lawyers are like, oh, you've got it. You've got the degree. No, you're like a fisherman sent out to the Bering Sea and expected to bring back fish or crab, one or the other. Right. And whether it's calm sea or rough sea, you got to go out and get dirty. And there are going to be taking emotional hits, and there are going to be things. But when you align and this is what I really worked with recently with my own dilemmas and problems, is that when you really, it's a phrase I said today for a friend, I made this up. When you grow strong roots, you'll bear good fruit. So that's really what it comes. And the second thing I tell people, you want things to work in your alignment, greet or meet or offer hospitality, meet in hospitality, leave in hospitality. That is the language of wealth. You can't get past that. So when people are always blaming this and that person, expecting an HR department to defend you, or a union rep or whatever, when it comes to labor, they don't have your best interest. They just want to minimize the fallout. And that's what it comes down to. So my only suggestion, my answer to my own question is practice your own patience before others need to practice your patience. You learn to, you are the one, you're the master of your word. Say little. And the last one from the 48 Laws of Power, it's don't outshine the master. Right. Let them be the fool. Hey, it's your orders. I did what you said. You know what? And sometimes it doesn't work out, but a lot of times it does. And that's what I want to end with.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you so much. Because I'm the same way. I'm like, look, I never have to say I told you so, because we had a conversation. Those words never left my mouth in corporate, ever. Never had to say it, because we had the conversations, and then you made the decision. We did that. All righty. And then we keep moving on. I just smile and keep moving.
Well, the 2020, in the middle of February, I got let go of a firm that was really deep in fraud. And I had been only new to the firm, but I started my own business. I started my own practice, word of mouth. So just because you go against the grain of the masses doesn't mean there's not opportunity in the weeds. So
I love that. Alignment, vision, action. They were not aligned with your values. You saw a vision and you took action.
Yeah, I'm going to exit the stage and continue to listen. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate you being on the show. So, Stephanie, this whole idea of, getting aligned and then moving into action, in the middle of that, and I love what Jason just said too, because my logo, guys, if you go to my website, laurelrutledge.com, the big thing about my logo is a tree. Yeah. And it matters to me because I believe in your root system, right? So for me, you got to have grounded roots. And for me, it's faith, family, friends, and health. Those are my 4. So if something's wrong in my world, one of those 4 things is off. Yeah. And that's health with a big H, right? So physical, financial, emotional, all of that. And so, when you look at being aligned and knowing what your root system is, having those really strong roots so you can do the things you need to do, in the middle of that vision, that alignment, and that action is a vision. And so when you think about all of these things you were seeing that were not aligned, and then knowing you had to take action, how did you find a way, or did you find the time in this moment to really say, you know what, but here's what I see for me, Stephanie, that is going to support the fact that this is the action that I need to take? Like, do that kind of really getting clear on the vision for yourself, or did it come later?
Look, I think we have to acknowledge that having the ability to make decisions based on things aligning with your values is a privilege.
Yes.
And so I think that point needs to be really made. And it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And it's a hard truth that people need to chew on for a minute. Right now, we are in really, really hard times, and they're not going away anytime soon. And many people are going to have to make decisions in the best interest of keeping their health insurance.
Yes.
In the best interest of putting food on the table, in the best interest of not losing their home or their car. And so my answer to you, Laurel, even though it's potentially indirect, is this is kind of what's coming to my heart right now, because this is something I think about a lot. I would argue that most people today in our country don't have the privilege of even imagining the idea of, is what I'm doing aligned with my values? Yeah. So let's talk to them for a quick minute.
Yeah.
There is no shame, and you are not bad. You are not compromising who you are as a person if you have to do what you do.
Yes.
To feed your family and feed yourself and make sure that you have shelter and food.
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about how we deal with that, because you know what? That's where most people are. And there's a couple wake-up calls I want to talk about before I dive into how you manage that through my eyes. Doesn't make me an expert. I'm just offering you my opinion. I want you all to pay attention to the following, because this is really important. We do not teach people how to live in the world of finances. That's kind of structured that way.
Right.
But, you know, I came from the time of, but I still have checks. What do you mean I don't have money?
Right.
There's still checks, which means there's money. And the bank is like, did anybody teach you? I'm like, turns out no. The stock market is doing great.
Yeah.
The stock market is not the economy.
Nope.
And the stock market does not reflect how most Americans are doing right now. So if you see celebration over here, but you see poverty here,
yes,
start paying attention to that too, because it's really important for you and your children and your loved ones.
Right.
If you have to suck it up, which is where I would suggest most Americans are, and you have to do a job you do not love, and maybe it's a job that is draining your soul.
Yes.
Which most people are in right now, so I want to talk to you. I have been there.
Yeah.
And the privilege of being able to say, maybe this isn't aligned with my values, so I'm just going to stop. That's a privilege. So let's talk about self-care. If you are in a position where you have to do what you have to do to feed your family, and you have to do what you have to do to make sure that you have shelter, even if you don't have a family and you just need shelter. Live in your power of saying that I am doing what I have to do to be okay, and there is no shame in that. Do what you have to do to be okay, because then the rest of this luxury conversation of alignment is over here. Yes. So do what you have to do. And throughout the day, if you are having to do things that are not aligned with your values, it is okay to say, I'm okay. And I'm doing what I have to do to be okay.
Yes.
And I have many ways that I can show the alignment in my vision. Through feeding people down the street. Y'all, I promise you, no matter where you live or what your neighborhood looks like, there are people that are within walking distance that are having to make a decision about whether they're going to feed their kids breakfast or dinner. I promise you the data shows us that.
Absolutely.
You can give in ways that are going to feed your soul and literally feed other people. And that's how you can do that.
Yeah.
And so it's okay, because this particular conversation of where Laurel's heart is really important. But we are living in a very hard time.
Yes.
So do what you need to do to take care of your family. And also, if you are someone who cares about how other people are doing, and you care about the fact that people are not okay, there are so many ways. Laurel, I'm going to land my plane here. I got to tell you a story.
Yes.
So I have had my own struggles. I mean, real struggles with being a single mom who is responsible for her children. I mean, hard. And I think my public persona would say like, oh, she's always been fine. No, she hasn't. I think that what's important is this. So it was Mother's Day, this last Mother's Day. And my daughter outgrew this desk that she had had forever. And my heartstrings were like, oh, but that's your baby desk. And she's like, I'm done and I'm all right, let it go.
Right.
So I put it on, here we go, Facebook, a group. And it sat there and I didn't even think about it. Then right before Mother's Day, I had this woman reach out to me and say, is that desk still available? And I said, yeah, it is. And she said, okay, it's it was $85. And I think I don't know, it doesn't matter what I spent, but I thought 85 was the deal. We don't know what the hell we're talking about. So she said, and I took pictures of it, and she said, well, would you be willing to take X? And I said, look, the price is the price. I don't even, P.S., maybe I'm the jerk. I don't even know why I said that. Really, I don't. But I mean, also, I'm a single mom. Y'all, trust me when I say to you, it's real. But, and so it would have been nice to have that money. And so I said, well, that's the price. And if it's uncomfortable for you, it's not a problem. Move along. And she said, okay, I'll take the desk. And I said, okay. And she said, well, can I come pick it up at X time? And I said, sure. Gave her my address. And I checked on Facebook. I checked it. Do your research, y'all. Do you have common friends? Like, go look for people before you let them show up on your doorstep. By the way, I moved it out onto the driveway. I did not let this person in my house. Please just take that as a thing. And so it suddenly occurred to me 10 minutes before she pulled up, because she said, I'm close, and all of a sudden it occurred to me, it's the day before Mother's Day. And you, the mom, are picking up this desk. And I was like, people aren't eating right now. And then I made a decision. And I'll tell you that in a minute. So she sends me a message. I'm out front. Great. I had the desk. So I ran to the desk. And I wrote a note, and it said, Happy Mother's Day, amount due, 0. And all that I ask is that you pay it forward in the way that you can. So I walk outside. Her babies were in the back of that truck. Her babies were in the back of that truck. There was other furniture in the back of her truck that she had picked up. She comes out. I hand her, and I think she assumed that it was going to be the invoice. Understandable. So she looked at it, and she looked up at me, and she looked at it again. She looked up at me, and she said, I don't understand. And I said, I'm giving you the desk. And she said, what? I said, I'm giving you the desk, and my only ask is that in whatever way you can, pay that kindness forward. She started to cry. She gave me a hug. Her little girls came out of the car. They're hugging me too, probably because they're like, Mom's hugging her. They don't know what they're hugging me. They're like, oh, we're supposed to hug her. I was like, okay. I helped her lift the desk into the back of the truck. And when she pulled away, my greatest disappointment is that it didn't occur to me before that. Look, there's privilege in that too. And guess what that is? Here's the privilege. I don't deserve that applause, but thank you. I don't deserve it. And here's why. I had the privilege of saying, if I don't get the money for this desk, I can still feed my babies. It would have been nice to have. But and I didn't tell her to give something away for free. I asked her to pay that kindness forward, whether that's just holding the door open for someone, whatever that is. We can all do something. And all that I ask is at the end of the day, if any of you saw the pictures from NASA as we got new insights into the universe, if you are paying attention to the fact that this earth is a dot on the end of my pinky, and there is this universe that we still do not fully understand, we matter, and in some weird way we don't. And so why would you ever piss this existence away by being a fraud, by waking up every day going, how can I take from people? How can I grift off of people? By the way, the punchline is she sent me a picture later on Facebook of that desk in her little girl's room. And she said, look at how pretty my daughter's room is. And with that money, I'm going to have an extra week of groceries.
Wow. See? Yes.
That doesn't make me a hero. I'm not a hero at all. It means that that is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. People are having to make decisions about food versus medicine versus. And so we have an obligation and a responsibility. If you cannot align your values to your job, God bless you. I get it. I've been there. I might be there again. I don't know. But you know what you can do when you leave that job, if it's not aligned with your values, is look for the opportunities, because sadly, they are everywhere. So I'm just saying, it does not cost us anything other than the good feeling associated with doing right by someone and helping a fellow human being.
Yes.
That's
to be
it.
kind. To be kind. Well,
That's
and I
it.
think what you said is so important, because one of the things I talk to people all the time about I remember talking in an MBA class, and it was about careers, and we were talking about what they were going to do and where they wanted to go. And I said, look, guys, I said, people get so upset. The same thing you said, they get so upset where they are. They hate their job. It's not where they want. Like, number one, the reason I call stuff the Rutledge perspective is I'm like, you shift your perspective, you shift your circumstances. Don't think about it as, I just hate this. I can't believe I have to do this. Think about it as, you know what? Right now, it's easy to find something else when I got something. I can put this in the right perspective. This is what I have to do until I can do what I want to do, but it does not have to take over my life. So I can put it in the right perspective to say, this is just funding my next thing. How can I look at what I'm doing now and the transferable skills that I'm learning? So when I put together that next resume, I've got all this other stuff that I've done. How can I volunteer for something else while I'm here? If I really hate this boss and that's the problem, can I volunteer on another project where I only have to deal with the boss 30 minutes? Make a strategic decision where you are to shift your attitude, because it's okay. As you say, there's no shame in doing what you got to do so you can do what you want to do. None whatsoever. The practical is real. Buying groceries, paying bills, having a place to live, a roof over your head. It is real. And we all struggle. And there is, I think about it all the time. When I left corporate, I was very privileged to be able to do that. I just had enough. It was me and Jesus. I'm like, Lord, now I'm walking away. I'm ready to walk away. I just, and he made a way, right? It was just time. He made a way. But there have been times, because this entrepreneurial journey, guys, is not easy. Anybody that tells you all that bullshit you see on Instagram, stop it. Stop. And Facebook and TikTok and all that, that's not real. Okay.
It's not real.
It is not easy. And there are times when I literally have to go back to, Laurel, what is your worst case scenario? What's your worst case scenario? And the fact that I know my worst case scenario is I'm not going to be on the street with no food. As long as my mom's here and my brother's here and my cousins are here, I will be embarrassed, right? I have to sell my house. I have to sell my stuff. It'll be painful and embarrassing, or I'll have to go back to corporate. But I won't be homeless.
That's right.
And I won't be food insecure.
That's right. That's right.
And that in and of itself is privilege. We think about privilege being connected to something else. If you have an ability to make any decision,
a choice
of your own volition,
is a
you
privilege.
have any choice, you have privilege.
Thank you. That's exactly right.
Any choice, you have privilege. So we have to be careful. Words matter. We have to be careful about how we talk about things. We have to be careful. Well, Stephanie, it's 8:08. This was just so awesome. I am so thankful and so grateful and so honored that you would be on my show, that you would share your genius with us. It is just the slayer of disinformation, the mayor of Fireside. I am so absolutely thrilled and so excited that you were here. I know everybody in the audience, thank y'all so much for being here and for participating and for your comments. I saw all of those. I'm going to go back and read them again. Thank you so much for all of your contribution and for listening. I will get this replay up so you can listen to it again. Please follow Stephanie, watch for her, and everybody else that's down there too. There's some amazing shows for the people that are in this audience. Stephan, yours, Rocksteady, I've listened to yours.
Yes.
Sonia, I haven't listened
Lily
to yours
every
yet.
Saturday.
Yes. Just amazing folks. So come be a part of Fireside. Come see what these creators are creating and how we are building community, and how people like Stephanie are really helping us all do that, and do that in a way that is genuine and authentic, and adding value and being a safe space for people to show up. So Stephanie, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's been awesome. Everybody, we will catch you next week. It's going to be a special time next week. It's going to be my special Empowerment Village. So Jenny and I will be doing that for Empowerment Village.
Y'all go listen to that. Oh my God. It's so amazing. Her Empowerment Village, by the way, you're going to be like, you're going to go to church. I'm not kidding. And I'm like, you define church any way you want, but you're going to be like, I'm a church. I feel like this is church. Like, you're going to love it.
We had the best time. We had the best time.
Amazing.
So please join me next week. It's going to be I think it's noon on the 11th. So join me then. I'll do all the postings so you guys will see it. Would love to have you there. Thank you for tuning in. I do not take it for granted. I am always honored and humbled when people decide to make the choice to spend time with me. So thank you for being